East Stroudsburg University track and field as the Warriors come back from the PSAC Indoor Championships. Head coach of the men's team, Joe Koch, of the women's team, Chris Merli. And Joe, we'll start with you briefly before we get to the individual winners on the women's side. Your men's team, the runner-up for the 5th time in 8 PSAC championships. That's a very sustained stretch of excellence from Warriors men's track and field.
Yeah, especially great concern. Those first couple runner-up finishes was a group that has now graduated 2 years ago. So it was a real gratifying meet. We had, I counted 29 PRs on the men's side out of 27 competitors. So it was an outstanding championship.
Coach Merli, you had 3 individuals who were the top seed in their event going in, and you ended up with 3 individual championships from those athletes, plus a double from Danielle Smith in the 60 and the 200.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I think we talked last week, and we said that the seed really doesn't matter. You got to show up, and I say we usually show up at this meeting, and you know, unfortunately we did. Liz, you know, I mean, we had our people ready. Christina, clutch jump on her 3rd attempt. You know, she was pretty nervous before the event, and Danny was gaining confidence. When she's confident, she's got to run a race, and you know, it was pretty much a repeat of last year's outdoor, where obviously the 100's closer, or you know, the shorter dash is closer, but the 200, I mean, I think she demoralized them in the trials, and you know, just held up in the finals, and she's running well. So.
Yeah, she was 24.99.
Yes,
in the prelims, 25.04 in the final.
Yeah, yeah.
And even won the 60 by a full 1/10 of a second,
yeah,
which is a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, and my heart jumped to my throat at the start. She stumbled like at the first 3 steps. She actually caught her toe. Usually when you stumble, it's a good start, but sometimes the adrenaline takes over. But boy, she ran her race. She wasn't worried about anybody else. Just, you know, people think that. You know, you're running against other people. Really, the race is in your lane. You do what you need to do, and things take care of themselves.
Liz Madden in the weight throw broke her own school record, 52 1 3/4.
Really gratifying for Liz. She plays volleyball for us. She was sort of beat up. I mean, I think it was 2nd last year indoor, and then missed her whole outdoor season, rehab and some chronic things, and really satisfying for her. That was great. You know, our throwers, you know, in general, had a nice day down there. I know we're talking about the men. I remember last year, they were all freshmen last year, and they were all sitting on the wall the 2nd day of the meet. You know, none of them made finals, and they were sort of like, "Oh my God, you know, what did we get ourselves into?" And this year, they came back with a vengeance. It was really gratifying.
Christina O'Connor in the high jump. You know, the vertical jumps are a little different because you got to hit a specific mark, and as you said, she got over 5. Was it 5?
5.7 3/4. Yeah.
And then had the shot.
Took a whack at Karen's school record. It was pretty interesting. Yeah, she actually had 3 pretty good attempts at the height. Yeah. She really did. So, but
we'll come back to her in a little bit. We'll talk about the NCAA provisional list. But Joe, on your men's side, you didn't have any individual winners. You won the 4x4 relay at the end to solidify 2nd. So we'll get into that race, and then also you had 10 events where you had an athlete in the top 4, which you know really allows you to balance out your team, and it was across the sprints, the jumps, and the throws.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the most gratifying thing was to see how hard the kids competed. Some of those individual scores weren't even ranked in the top 15 or 20 going into the meet. So we really depended on some newcomers, freshmen, transfers, depended upon some kids who really had never had an impact in the meet before, and they came through for us. So that really was outstanding. The relays were unbelievable. Winning the 4x4, which you mentioned, getting 2nd in the 4x8, and 3rd in the DMR. So it was nice to see you know, the team do so well.
Obviously, in the relays, a lot of people contribute. One in particular ran on all 3, also finished 3rd in the 800, Mike Saporito.
Yeah, I mean, Sap's gotten it done for us for 3 or 4 years now, and what's unique about him is the more races he runs, the better he seems to do. So maybe his best race of the entire championship was the mile relay, the last event of the meet. And yeah, he's unique. Usually most people, they give 1 or 2 hard efforts and they're pretty much done for the meet. But that guy, man, maybe he should be a decathlete because he just keeps going and going. The Energizer Bunny, I guess.
You were 2nd by 4.5 points going into the 4x4. You were ahead of Slippery Rock. You knew that they were high on the entry list. You were high. And then Shippensburg had already wrapped up the team title, but it was going to come down to those three. But if those spots shift a little bit in the 4x4, it could come down to a second or a fraction.
Sure, sure. I mean, that's the way I guess any championship is. You know, it's kind of like taking that three-pointer thing with the game down by 2 points with the game tied. You know, I believe Slippery Rock was ahead of us on the list going in, but our guys lost the race by 0.2 of a second last year. Coach Merli had them primed and ready to go, and yeah, they came through. So that was the difference between getting second or third and getting top two teams get trophies. So it worked out real well for us.
You had a couple events in particular. You had multiple scores, the 60, the 3,000 you got 9 points out of, the 5,000 you went third and fourth.
Correct.
For a nice haul. The high jump, I think 15.5, and the weight throw you had too. So you know, you scored in a lot of events, but certain events you really were able to pick up big team points.
Yeah, actually, I think, Greg, we scored in every event on the track, and we only missed a couple, 2 or 3 field events that we did not score in. So like you mentioned at the start of this interview, it really was a team effort all around. There really wasn't any event area, jumps, throws, distance, sprints, hurdles, where we didn't have an impact. And I already mentioned the relays doing so well. So yeah, it's been a pretty much a successful formula for us for the last several years. If we're going to do well team-wise, we need kids in a lot of different events.
Coach Merli, any key individuals aside from your 3 winners who really stood out to you?
Well, I'm thinking of our multi-event athletes. We asked a lot of them. Teresa Horn really came through. It was a much tougher event. You know, the competition was much tougher. There was 2 girls from Edinboro on a national list ahead of her, and then Nia Williams. We had her. You know, she had to take a couple long jumps to try to get her in a long jump final before she ran the hurdles, and then in the middle of her high jump, or just before she high jumped in the multi-event, she had to run the trials and the hurdles, and then she really came through for us on the 4x4. I mean, like I said before, we had that relay. It was the first time, and I'm just trying to remember this morning, in 10 or 11 years, we had nobody in the final of the 400, and yet our relay got third, our 4x4 got third, and that's a tribute to, you know, well, you know, it's just a tribute to the people that, you know, we really had to extend some of our key people, and you know, Lauren Ventrella was another one. You know, she was dealing with some health issues, and you know, she ran the trials of the hurdles and the 200 and came back and set us up for the 4x4.
We had mentioned too, Danielle Smith won the 60 and 200. Also, Rachel Parentozzi scored.
Rachel, thank you. Rachel was real. I mean, coming in, a lot of high school sprinters are like, you know, my philosophy, you know, well, maybe you don't like the 200, but it's going to help your shorter race. And Rachel PR'd by, I think, almost 0.3 of a second in the final, and it was just really solid. And she was winning 100th of her PR. She ran it twice, so I mean, she was on her game, trials and finals in the 60. And you know, the other 2 ladies that just edged her out, actually, you know, were ranked #1 in the PSAC at some point during the year before Danielle got her act together, you know. So, yeah, Rachel's going to be a key. You know, and then we also had 2 other young, you know, had another junior, Brittany Jones, and a freshman in that 60 mix. Brittany's running really well, so, I mean, looking, you know, when we jump the gun, but looking at the outdoors, you know, a 4x1 was solid. Broke the school record by half a second last year. I mean, we're on track to really keep it going with there's actually 5 ladies in the mix for that 4x1. So,
Coach Koch, couple, as we mentioned, some outstanding individual performances. In the high jump, you had 3 freshmen or really first-year athletes go PR at 6'6" and 3/4.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tribute to Karen, our coach, Coach Gata. She does a fantastic job, and they really, for a freshman to handle themselves so well and compete so well was impressive. No 2 ways about it. But yeah, they did a great job, and Will, one of the 3 guys, ran on 2 of our relays. So we had a pretty busy weekend. Yeah,
and that was William Berry, Donovan Tolbert, Seth Bailey. Donovan Tolbert, third in the triple jump as well. And want to jump back to the track with the 400. Damien Bowen runs third. Mike Saporito runs second. Mike Saporito third in the 800, and then the 3K and 5K. Those guys.
Yeah, you know, Damien has won the seeded heat, they do a 2-heat final, and the kid nipped him in the previous heat. So, I mean, you know, he was right there and had a national qualifying mark in both the trials and the finals. We already talked about Mike running all those different events and just keep it going. The 2 guys who beat him are on the national list and will be competing at nationals. So, you know, no, excuse me.
Fez
Yeah.
Frank.
Yeah, so yeah, and then our distance guys, Chris Snyder PR'd by, I think it was about 4 seconds in the 3K. Frank Fezza did one of the toughest triples in all my years here, anchoring the DMR with the mile leg in 4:15, and then running the 5,000 later that day, PRing, and then coming back the next day and run the 3K. So that's almost 6 miles of competitive racing. That's a lot of laps, and he was outstanding.
He fought every one of them too.
Yeah, and we talked going in. You know, those guys were the core again of the cross country,
right.
You know, runner-up team in the conference, the region, went to NCAAs. You know, for those guys, they're only 2/3 of the way through their season now because you know you've got another 2 months or 2.5.
And Jim Romano, one of our captains, he was right with Frank in the 5K. Came back running PR in a mile the next day. So just everything we talked about. You know, the kids competing hard over 2 days of the meet. And being up to the challenge, no matter what race or when in the meet it came up.
On the national list, obviously, you have a couple kids who will have the opportunity to continue. Hopefully, that's going to be announced this week. And at this point, Christina O'Connor tied for 5th in the high jump. Travis Toth's 18th on the list in the weight throw. Just kind of go through how those selections are made real quick, and you know, kind of the expansion of the field and how that.
Well, I expanded it to 16 this year, and then in the field events it gets a little dicey because if you're near the bottom, we talk about this behind the scenes. It's about plane tickets. NCAA pays for so many people to be there. You know, there's a total number of athletes they're going to bring to the meet. So I was just really familiar with Danielle Smith's situation. She's 20th on the list.
Right.
However, 9 of those women are also in the 200, and 3 of them are in the long jump. So but then you know it's a committee decision on where those extra athletes go.
Yeah.
You know, and there's natural breaks sometimes in the distances and things like that. So, I mean, Travis, Danielle, Christy's definitely in the meet. You know, so. We'll see what happens. I mean, that's what it looks like right now.
Yeah, basically, summarizing what Coach Merli said, basically some field size can be larger than 16 because they have athletes that compete in several events.
And there's a declaration situation there as well where, like, if you're on the 60 list and the 200, but you could declare in one and not the other.
Correct.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And then that happened in the it happened in the 60. I didn't see people, you know, because I think she was 22. You know, we were looking at the list on the way home after they were posted nationally on our bus ride, and she was 22. And then when the declarations came out, she was 20th. So, you know, but we'll see. It depends on it. Again, a lot of times we've had the situation in the past. I remember Matt Gallup, our school record in Lepoval, he was tied at that time. They were taking 12, and there was 5 guys tied for 12. So they took 11 guys and they added people somewhere else. They're not going to take. You know what I'm saying? So that it all goes into, and it comes down to committee decision, and it's you know, you hate to say it, but it does get a little political sometimes.
Final thing, obviously, you talked about Karen Gata in the high jump, your high jump coach,
our assistants,
a national champion. You know, you had Christy win the high jump this year indoors. Lynn Mayer had won it 4 straight, 2010, 2011. You've had men up there every single year. That event kind of in particular, you know, in the field events has kind of stood out as, you know, something that you guys can really be proud of.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I think just to touch on that, I think getting good coaching, I'm not knocking what these athletes had in high school, but lots of times they do several events. They really don't have an opportunity to focus on their one event. With Karen, it's very technically precise, and these kids have made some nice improvements since high school because they have technically improved. Not only have they gotten stronger, faster, what other components of their event, but technically they've made some real progress. And like I say, that's a real tribute to Coach Gata. She does a fantastic job.
Anticipating this morning, as Joe and I, we have a lot of office work to do, and we wouldn't be where we were without, Coach Morrison, who works with our throws, again, a really technically proficient guy, and, gets it in college. We all try and do this, you know. Well, kids got buy-in on their ability in high school, and then I always tell our jumpers, horizontal jumpers, Coach Morrison tells us, well, we're going to screw you up for a while and undo some of these unfortunate habits you may have. And so getting the kids to buy into that. And then we have our new assistant coach, Frayne, who's a multi-event athlete, and you know, who's really made some steps there with our kids, been able to give them some more attention. And so, I mean, you know, it's a great group. All started with Coach Koch, you know, stumbling over me in the hallway somewhere one day. So, I mean, you know, it's a great effort on our coaching staff.
You guys have, as we said, NCAA indoors coming up. When you turn very briefly to the outdoor season, there's a couple kids who did not compete indoors.
Right. Yep.
Your javelin throwers, Josh Hans coming back, Matt Tolis. Just talk about them very quickly. What they do during the indoor season when they're not competing to get ready to go outside.
Well, I mean, for starters, Josh is national runner-up, and Matt was All-American. He placed 6th or 7th last year in the jab. So those are two of the best athletes in the country in their event. I mean, they work out pretty much year-round. I mean, they were working out last summer. But, yeah, speak about the differences between high school and college. High school, 2 weeks before the season starts, you get out there, do a little conditioning, and boom, the meets start. These guys are in the weight room. They're working technique, which we just mentioned. You know, doing drills, all that stuff.
They get a nice day. They get outside. They plan their day, a week around. Maybe a good day outside on the runway. You know, even in the winter.
I mean, our 4x1 relays have been very competitive in the conference. Had some good steeplechasers the last couple of years. You know, Corinne Fitzgerald was conference champion, went to nationals last year. So all these events we don't have indoors, we'll be picking up outdoors. And some of the events we have some very competitive, some real successful athletes.
You guys obviously looking forward to the nationalists coming out, and then see where that takes us for ESU. So look forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
All right.
See you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye.